This just in. 3 animals have escaped from a zoo in rural Georgia. We found them. Let's see what they have to say.
So, Pumbaa, what do you think of the situation?
You see, economic development, infrastructure, healthcare, and more factors all play a role in the network of problems of rural Georgia. The communities have fallen behind in the growth and prosperity of urban communities due to more remote resources in these areas. These cause rural communities to fall behind not only in economics, but in education as well. Poor education leads to poor healthcare because with no knowledge of reliable medical treatments, people do not know what to do to treat themselves. They also do not have the money to pay for their healthcare needs because lack of education leads affects their wage and job abilities.
Oh, those are some very valid points. What about you, Simba?
I'm going to tell you why it is significant to Georgia. Issues such as economic distress, funding, and access to healthcare all affect education in these areas. Access to healthcare is one of the main problems. Georgia has only seen 4 new hospitals since 2010. Many people do not live within 30 minutes of a hospital, and people in these areas do not have enough to pay for medical insurance, keeping them out of the hospital. The first department to close in these areas is gynecology. This means mothers are not receiving prenatal care and children are being born with development issues. This affects children's learning abilities. Another factor is economic distress. Georgia is the 4th economically distressed state in the country. In a few years, job growth in rural Georgia will decrease to 1.6%. This decrease leads to wages being cut and unemployment. This is bad for these communities because many of their weekly wages are already half the national average. The last problem is funding. Classes in these communities are smaller due to less people living in rural Georgia. Since these classes are smaller, there is less funding for them. This leads to lower teacher pay and worse school conditions such as bad air conditioning, problems keeping the lights on, and operational factors. The lack of funding leads to lower property values and increased poverty. It also means students with disabilities do not get proper education.
What about you, Timo?
Georgia is taking some action steps to help this increasing problem. The Georgia Foundation for Public Education Board of Directors created the Rural Education Opportunity Fund. It provides support for school communities in rural Georgia. Next, the Georgia General Assembly created the Senate Rural Georgia Study Committee and House Rural Development Council to better understand and address issues facing rural Georgia. Lastly, the Center for Rural Prosperity by the Commerce of Georgia is bringing leaders together to address challenges facing rural communities. In order for this issue to get better, these efforts must continue.
Those are some very valid points.
Georgia.